Well, welcome to Business 211 Supervision, or as we like to call it, Effective Supervision Online with Professor Joe Lane. You may have watched video 3 just a little while ago. Maybe video 3, it's been a week or so out. Probably wouldn't be that long with the summer. But I thought I'd brighten us up a little bit for video 4 and maybe for the next videos, and get a little brighter, get a little redder, and that sort of thing. Now, we're getting ready to do Chapter 4. Chapter 4 has to do with ethics. Do you think a supervisor has an ethical role? Well, you probably already guessed that, and of course the answer is yes. But let me kind of talk for a minute with where we are. In Chapter 1, we looked at the supervisor as a leader, a motivator, having to have influence. And we talked a lot about that, especially leadership. In Chapter 2, we talked about the supervisor had to be a change agent. Sometimes maybe they might not even like that change, but they're a part of management. And it's their responsibility to bring that change about in their department. In Chapter 3, we talked about the importance of communications. As a matter of fact, our author said communications was the most important skill that a supervisor could have. Chapter 4, we're talking about the supervisor setting the example for ethical behavior. Now, these are going to be the first 4 videos, the first 4 chapters. After you finish these 4 videos, you'll be taking test number 1. So we're finished with, after we get through with this video and you take test number 1, you're through with 25% of this chapter. And of course, this being a summer class, this has all happened in the first week. So we're moving along pretty quickly. All right, now, if you've had me before, you know what this is. And this is the United States of America, the USA. Let me see if I got it in my screen here for you. Yeah, I did. Just want to be sure. Ethics. What are ethics? Well, if you look at your handout or your study guide, he says that ethics is the study of morality. And ethical behavior has to do with what's right, doing the right things. So ethics really has to do with right and wrong. I would imagine that most of you and I that are doing this video right now, our ethics are probably pretty close to the same. Now, I'm not saying our ethics are going to be exactly the same, because some of the experiences and your home and things that have influenced you over your years may be something different than but I would imagine that our ethics are fairly close. So as far as what we believe is right, what we believe is wrong. So each one of us has certain ethics. We have certain ethical behavior that we live by. Now, if you take those ethics collectively, the ethics of individuals, here's our supervisor, and our supervisor has certain ethics. If you take the ethics of all the individuals within the United States, then you come up with the morality of our society, the morals of our society. Does that make sense? If all of us in the United States are very ethical, are we going to have a very ethical morality in the United States? The answer is yes. Now, maybe if some parts of the United States, the ethical, we've always talked about the South as being the Bible Belt. Is that perhaps maybe the ethics stronger in that part of the United States than other parts of the United States? Perhaps so. But anyway, I just want to let you have the idea that our individual ethics collectively makes up the moral fiber of our society, whatever that moral fiber is. Okay, let me sit down here and let's talk a couple of minutes about this. Should you act ethically? Do you want other people to act ethically? Do you want businesses that you do business with to act ethically, to treat you ethically, to treat you fairly, to do what is right? I think the answer to most of those questions would be yes. And in our handout it says this, handout for me, your study guide for the chapter. There is almost universal agreement that the business practices of organizations should be above reproach with regard to ethical standards. If we were in class, I would probably ask you, what percentage of businesses do you feel like are ethical? And normally in a class, I'll get everything from about 10 to 20% to 80 to 90%. And here's my feelings. And it's just my feelings. Doesn't mean you have to agree. I think the vast majority of businesses try to be ethical most of the time. You say, well, what do you base that on? Well, I base it on this. If I were to look at you individually and say, are you an ethical person? You'd probably tell me yes. And if you ask me, are you an ethical person? I'd probably say, I would say yes. You try to act ethically? Yes. All right, then if you ask me the question, have you ever done anything that when you did it or after you did it, you looked back and you said, I shouldn't have done that. That wasn't the right thing to do. Maybe I acted unethically. So if you look at Joe Lane, do I view myself as an ethical person? Yes. Do I want to be ethical? Yes. In my short lifetime, smile there, in my lifetime, have I ever done anything probably that was not right or unethical? Yeah, I probably have. Maybe if I didn't even intend to, but I did. And I think this is a way with the vast majority of businesses. I think most businesses and most employees of businesses most of the time try to be ethical. They slip sometime and they fall like we do, but for the most part they're trying to do well. Now there are some that are just crummy, just like there are some people that are just totally unethical. But I think the majority are ethical. That's just my opinion. And here's one of the reasons I say that. Customers expect businesses to be ethical. What's the bottom line for a business? Profit. If you're not profitable, you're going to go belly up. So let's connect the dots here. People expect businesses to be ethical. If a business is not ethical, I'm not going to do business with that business. If I don't do business with that business is not going to get revenue. If that business doesn't get revenue, they're going to have a hard time making a profit. So if you connect those dots, it's profitable for businesses to be ethical. Okay. Ethics is a study of morality. Ethical behavior means doing the right thing within a moral framework, and we've already talked about that. And ethics starts at the home for families. Ethics starts at the top for businesses. If you want your business to be ethical, those at the top have to be ethical, and they have to preach ethics throughout the business. They have to insist on ethics throughout the business. They have to teach ethics throughout the business. They have to mentor ethics throughout the business. If you're a first-line supervisor right here, and you find yourself in a business where top management has very different ethical standards than what you have, and you're very uncomfortable with their standards, you really have two choices. Stay in your position and adjust to those ethical standards, or get out, because you're not going to change the business from down here. Okay? All right. He talks about you as a supervisor. Are you ever going to have to make an ethical decision? Yes. It didn't take me long to answer that. You're going to have ethical decisions that you have to make. And remember, you've got to set the ethical example. Man, another thing that a supervisor has to do. You as an individual, as someone here at Delta Community College, every time you come into class, when we used to come into class, and hopefully we'll do that again before long, and We're taking a test. The person sitting next to you, can you look on their test paper and cheat? Well, I'd appreciate it if you didn't. I kind of check around to make sure people don't to the best of my ability. But that would be unethical behavior. What if you're taking a test and you really know the stuff? And you know the person next to you is cheating off of you? How does that make you feel? So I guess the thing I'm saying is that we have ethical decisions in our lives all the time. And supervisors are going to have ethical decisions come up in their role as a supervisor. Now, where I am so far, I'd like for you to be familiar with what ethics is. I'd like for you to be familiar with what ethical behavior is. And I'd like for you to know some tests that you can take if you run across something that you're trying to decide whether it's ethical or not. And we'll talk about this primarily as a supervisor now. And I put them on here for you. I just kind of laid them out on your study sheet. I'm going to talk about them just a little bit for you. I said here are guidelines for the following determining ethical behavior. If you have to decide if something is ethical or not, you need to have some guidelines. You need to have some ways, some things you can look at or some things you can apply to determine whether it's ethical or not. And he says here are some tests, 5 tests that you can give to see if something is ethical or not. Test number 1, the morning after test. If I do this, how am I going to feel about it the next day? Am I still going to feel good about it the next day? The mirror test. Well, look, when it's just me and you, just me and me, and I'm looking in that mirror, and again, it's just me and you, my reflection in the mirror. How do I really feel about what I did? How do I really feel? How do I really feel about the other me in that mirror? That's the mirror test. The front page test. What if, they still have newspapers? What if somebody threw out a newspaper and you picked it up and you read the front page, and the front page was all about what you did as far as making that decision? Would you be okay with that? If the decision you made hit the news, so to speak, or maybe in this day and time hit social media. The role reversal test. Normally when you make a decision that affects somebody else, what if you were that other person? How would you feel if you were that other person about the decision that was made? And then the last one he talks about is the common sense test. There's nothing wrong with common sense. A lot of times, when you're getting ready to make a decision or something, you go through all the things, and you just sit down and say, does this make sense? Does this make good sense? So I'd like for you to know the 5 tests that you can give yourself to figure out if something is ethical or not. And maybe know them and be able to at least say a part of a sentence about each one. The morning after test, the mirror test, the front page test, the role reversal test, the common sense test. Now, if you're looking at your study notes, there's something else right below that. And it talks about there are 3 questions that you can ask yourself, or 3 other questions that you can ask yourself concerning whether something is ethical or not. And those 3 questions are, is it legal, is it balanced, and how does it make me feel about myself? Now, the only thing I want us to be familiar with as far as those 3 questions are concerned, and this is just familiar with, is this. If something is illegal, is it unethical? And the answer to that is yes. Because our society talks about what is right and wrong. And if our society says this is illegal, this is unlawful, by definition, if it is illegal, it is unlawful, it is wrong, it is unethical. But I don't think it's wrong. I think it's okay. You're welcome to your opinion. You may well think it's perfectly okay to drive 90 miles an hour on the interstate, but it's still illegal. It's still wrong. You're still going to get a ticket. So this is, yeah, so here's what I want you to be familiar with. If it's illegal, it's unethical. Now, let me just confuse you some, just for fun. If it's legal, does that make it ethical? No. If it's legal, that passes the first step. But then you have to look at these other things. Is it balanced? That role reversal thing. How does it make me feel? I look in the mirror. There are some things that could be legal, but still not ethical. All right, so let me sum this up now that I've got you confused. I want you to know the 5 tests that we talked about for determining ethical behavior. The mirror, the morning after, the mirror, the front page, that sort of thing. And then I want you to be familiar with just this. If something is illegal, it's unethical. Looks like I've got a bunch of no's in this chapter. And the next no that's coming up is the supervisor's role as it relates to ethics. That's probably the next thing on your study guide. I want you to know the supervisor's role as it relates to ethics. Okay, let's look at our guide. The first thing I've already said here, you've got to set the ethical example. 1 minute tangent. And I mentioned this to you in chapter 1, 2, or 3. The way employees view the company they work for primarily is through you. You are the company. You are the person that they see each day that represents the company. And so you have a real responsibility because you're not just representing yourself, but you're representing the company. All right, so number 1, when it comes to your role as a supervisor, number 1, responsible for setting an example of ethical behavior. What's the second thing you need to do? As employees are having to make ethical decisions, you need to help them make the right decision. Remember, supervisors, they motivate, they coach, they mentor. So the second thing that you need to do as far as a supervisor, responsible for helping employees make the right decisions when they're facing ethical questions. And then the third thing you should be doing, not only help them make the right decisions, but help them follow through on those decisions. It's great to make the right decision, but then you got to do it. And so I want you to know, I guess we could call them the 3 things that supervisors need to do, or the 3 parts of the supervisor's role as it relates to ethical behavior and it relates to ethics. Number 1, they need to set the example. Number 2, they need to help employees make ethical decisions. They need, number 3, to help employees, once they've made those ethical decisions, to follow through with them. Okay. Our author talks about something after this that I really am only going to mention for a moment because it's okay, but and I'll tell you why I say that in just a moment. He says, in making ethical decisions, let me look at my text. Let me see how he leads into this. If I can get the text here without tearing it apart. Like I say, I've got to put this in a binder. Here's how he says this. In carrying out their roles, supervisors can adapt one of the following approaches. It's following one of the following approaches as it relates to ethics. Okay. And here's what he says. The supervisor can utilize one of 3 approaches. And I put these down here for you. The best ratio approach. The best ratio approach is doing, when you're making ethical behaviors, do what is the most good for the most people. That's the best ratio. Make decisions, ethical decisions, based upon what's good for the most people. The second one is the black and white approach. That means it's either right or it's wrong. So you make an ethical decision based on, is it right in your opinion, after you've applied the test or whatever, or is it wrong? And the third approach is what he called the full potential approach. Make your decision based upon the ability of people or how it's going to affect people to reach their full potential. Now, in actuality, I don't think you're going to use any one approach when it relates to ethics. I don't think you're going to make your ethical decisions based upon the best ratio, what's best for the most. I don't think you're going to use the black and white, what's right, what's wrong, or the full potential, and use only that. I think you're going to use a number of things that's going to help you to make those decisions. And then again, once you've used those things, you may use your prior experiences. You may use your educational experiences. There may be a number of things that you use in addition perhaps to these three approaches. But whenever you've come up and then you've decided, okay, here's what I'm going to do, that's the time that you would apply those questions we talked about. Okay. The organization's role in ethics. If the supervisor has a role in ethics, then the organization must have a role in ethics as well. By the way, on those approaches, I would just like for you to be familiar with the black and white approach, the best ratio approach, the full potential approach, just what we mentioned about it. Black and white approach, what's right's right, what's wrong's wrong. Full potential, how your decision might affect people to reach their full potential, and the best ratio approach, the most good for the most people. Just be familiar with those. I want you to know the supervisor's role, but I just want you to be familiar with those three approaches. I also just want you to be familiar with the organization's role in ethics. Okay? What is the organization's role in ethics? Number one, create an internal environment that promotes, expects, and rewards ethical behavior. If you want ethics in your organization, and remember, ethics starts at the top. As I kind of mentioned on the lead end of this chapter, preach it, teach it, expect it, mentor it throughout your organization. Should people clearly understand, should there be a statement about ethical behavior? You know, our business is ethical, so. Should there be some bars, or should there be some in-service, some meetings explaining ethics and ethical behavior? And should there be certain things that maybe your business does where it's very specific as the ethical way to do that sort of thing? The answer to all those questions, of course, is yes. Create an internal environment. You've got to create an environment where when people walk in, customers walk in, employees walk in, visitors walk in, they're not there for very long before they realize this company cares about people. This company cares about doing what's right. It's important to them. That's the kind of internal environment you want to have. Number two, set an example of ethical behavior in all internal and external dealings. You do all these things I just mentioned, and then you mistreat your employees some way. The company does something with benefits, or does something with salary, or does something that relates to employees that's wrong. Then, hey, walk the talk. If you've ever heard that expression, it's great. It's great to mentor it. It's great to talk about it. It's great to have meetings about it. But you got to do it. You got to put it into action. Not only internally with your company, but with other companies as well. As your company deals with other companies, they should deal in a respectful, ethical way. Right. The third thing is this. Organizations must support supervisors who make ethically correct decisions. Look, as a supervisor, you expect, if you do things correctly, and honestly, fairly, and equitably. If you're following the policies and procedures of your company, and specifically if you're following the policies and procedures of your company as it relates to ethics, and you make a decision, your company needs to have your back. Your company needs to support you. You made a decision, and that decision may have cost the company some money, but it was the right decision. It was an ethical decision. It was just, you could have bought some materials from somebody else that could have reduced the cost of a product and maybe made that product then be more profitable to the company. But the material that you were buying or had been asked to buy was from some pretty unethical people that had their material just did not meet quality. And you knew that. And you made the decision, the right thing to do, the ethical thing to do is not deal with these people. They are not ethical people. It may have cost the company a few bucks. Okay. Do you expect your company to back you up for that ethical decision? The answer is yes, because it was a good ethical decision. Okay, probably too much of a tangent on that. However, the organization's role in ethics: create an internal environment that promotes, expects, and rewards ethics, set an ethical example internally and externally, and support employees who make ethical decisions. Those are things that to be familiar with. That kind of takes care of the chapter on ethics. That seemed like that was a quick chapter. You may not have felt that way on the other side, but it seemed like it was kind of a quick chapter for me. A lot of these chapters in supervision are kind of short chapters, but they're very important. Kind of a closing thought here. Ethics is really important. Most of us have some pretty strong ethical feelings. And you know, when you get that career job, one of the things that's really important is that you have the right fit. If you go to work for a company and you don't have the right fit, it just doesn't feel right. You know, when you work should be, you should be happy in what you do. Your career should be fun. It should be, that doesn't mean that every day is going to be fun, but you should be doing something you enjoy. And if you're working for a company and their ethics is different than yours, kind of as I mentioned at the beginning, and you're just not the right fit, you're going to be uncomfortable there. So part of that choosing where you work and that sort of thing and getting involved is being able to find a company that fits your ethics. And then you can get in there and you have a great feeling about that company, and then as you move up, you can promote ethical behavior as well. Okay, I think that's chapter 4. That's the last chapter before you take test number 1. So make sure that you go back. I would go back and review, make sure that you have read the introductory video. Make sure you have watched the introductory video. Watch video 1, 2, 3, and 4 for the 4 chapters. Make sure you've made notes about knows and be familiar with. Study real good. And then do a great job on test number 1. All right, you know how I'm supposed to sign off. My executive producer, Professor Ryan Pierce, always likes a loud noise to show that I have finished a chapter. So we are now finished with the chapter on ethics. I'm going to go back, have a little makeup done, you know, get everything ready, and I'm going to move into chapter 5 pretty quickly. So loud noise. See you in chapter 5.